Hello and welcome to Rauta. I am Jerry and once again we'll go through a review album and in this time one of my favorite bands this day, Evergrey. Yes, I know it's surprising coming from a black death metal head to really like a band that is more about progressive stuff, melancholic and beyond. Now, I am a quite recent Evergrey fan as such because for me the game-changing album was The Atlantic 2018 or so, and it was actually the time when the band was playing in Finland. I got to interview them with very little experience on the discography side of things and all. So soon it became evident that I really love the band, the music and all, but more of the, say, more modern era. This is how the digi sleeve, by the way, looks like. So no, CD tray here. It's just a sleeve where you put it. True Napalm Records, thank you for them for sending this album. Theories of Emptiness, the 14th album by this veteran band. So like I was saying, in 2018 things kind of changed. So suddenly I was loving this band which was very melancholic, almost like a later day Pink Floyd feeling, blending together with some jammed parts which are not definitely my cup of tea in general, but more so with the more progressive, very emotional output. And that album really became one of my favorites. Partially, big part of that is because Tom S. Englund doing his vocals. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with his guitar work either, but it's the vocal style, his singing, his voice, that how he conveys these emotions through everything. It was like, wow. So later on, a couple of more albums I got to review and all, and I really liked them. So 3 great albums in a row. Now, this is a little bit of a disappointment compared to those 3, not the early works. Because the early works, well, they really didn't do much for me. It was actually before The Atlantic where the band started changing their style a little bit. But for me, like I said, the game changer was The Atlantic. But there were good albums before that, obviously. And now it seems like after the great 3 strikes or so, the game has a little bit changed. Mind you, while I'm giving a little bit of negative vibe here, doesn't mean that I don't like this album. In fact, quite the contrary, I really do like this album. But when you have 3 great albums in comparison to what you have here right now, well, that's actually what I'm talking about. So, can you really repeat greatness after greatness after greatness so many times? Rarely. There are bands which are really able to do it, but I mean, that's really rare. Every now and then band kind of goes back to just the level of goodness, and that's what I'm talking about here. I mean, of course, there are, different preferences and all that stuff, and some people might say, yeah, that you get the all the way other way around and all that stuff, but I noticed I wasn't the only one who's saying like, this feels a little bit a disappointment compared to the previous ones. Like there was a colleague of mine rating this album only 7 out of 10 and still saying he liked the previous albums way more. I'm not that far with the rating because I think this is really a good album. But compared to the Atlantic, Escape of the Phoenix and Heartless Portrait already 2 years ago, I mean the pace has been very fast. The band has been very active recent years. Well, basically always, but I mean, there has been bigger gaps like 3 years and all versus 2 years, 1 year, 2 years, that kind of stuff. So anyways, the band has been kind of picking the pace in a way, even though the early years they had quite quick pace too. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. Hard to guess and hard to say for sure, of course. But Theories of Emptiness, it's a good album that kind of continues the path the band has been for more than a decade or so. And basically everything, theoretically speaking, everything is right there. You have the good vocal part, you have the emotional guitar riffs, you have almost like the momentum for really a hit song things. But now there is the difference between great and good stuff when it's almost versus what's the real deal. And in my opinion, much like my colleague said, and another one I was talking about this album recently, said that this album feels like it's not having the hit moments. And I have to kind of like agree with that. I mean, there are parts where this is really nice, like towards the end, I think it was Our Way Through Silence, like, you almost have it. I mean, basically you have it. But as opposed to the previous albums, which are like really going for the high moments, the really captivating parts, the really emotional parts. Now this is like close to it, but not there yet. And this is the dividing line. Mind you, we're talking about very small differences. We're not talking about this is a 7, this is a 10. We're more like talking about this is an 8 or 8.5 or 8 and 9. So small differences. Overall, I would say this album is a solid release. It's a solid Evergrey release, but without those surprise hit moments where you're like, man, this is so good. So it's almost like this is an album by Evergrey, which doesn't have the like, let's get audience crazy kind of thing where they sing along and all that stuff. Maybe there is a couple of those parts where people will do it, but still, in comparison, 3 previous albums are better. But this is not gonna change my mind about the band. I'm still very much stoked, but of course when you have high expectations and you're meeting just good expectations, I mean good reality rather, and that's where the difference comes from. But when we're talking about production, whether we're talking about vocal performance, guitars, drums, etc., it's all right there. You can't really bitch about it. So, summarize, I could say maybe Tom Englund is not suffering enough anymore, because when it was clearly he was pouring all the negative emotions on an album, and you could just feel it seep right into your skin and all under your skin. And now it's more like, maybe Tom, you're in a better place now. Maybe you're not suffering, and that's why these songs are not so emotionally loaded, which I kind of wish they were. So a lot of good songs come from a lot of good suffering, if there is good suffering in the first place. Anyway, if you're an Evergrey fan, I don't think you're gonna be disappointed, but maybe, much like me, you're not also gonna like this as much as, say, The Atlantic or Phoenix or Portrait. But that's for you to decide. Thanks for, once again, the label delivering me a copy. Thanks to the band for making a good album. And off you go, people. If you don't know the band, if you haven't checked them so far, give them a go. It's a good combination of progressive metal, emotional metal, melodic metal, a little bit something else in the mix. Like this time, Tom S. Englund is doing a little bit growly parts. So, something different, but mostly just a safe bet. Now, off you go. Check out the links provided in the description box and enjoy. Bye-bye.